How did a woman born into slavery defy all odds to become one of the most iconic freedom fighters in American history? Harriet Tubman, known as the Moses of her people, once said, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer." Her life was a testament to the power of courage, faith, and relentless determination. Today, we'll uncover the extraordinary story of Harriet Tubman, a fearless conductor of the Underground Railroad who risked her life to lead others to freedom. She was more than a liberator. She was a symbol of hope and justice, whose legacy continues to inspire us today. In this video, we'll explore Harriet's early life, the brutal realities of slavery, the dangerous missions she led, and her lasting impact on the fight for equality and human dignity. So, grab a cup of coffee and let's get into it. Be sure to stick around until the end to discover how you can help keep Harriet's legacy alive. Harriet Tubman was born around 1822 on a plantation in Dorchester County, Maryland. Her parents, Harriet Ritt Green and Ben Ross, were enslaved, and Harriet, then known as Araminta Minty Ross, was one of 9 children. Despite the brutality of their circumstances, her parents worked tirelessly to instill a sense of faith and dignity in their children. Harriet's early life was shaped by relentless labor, hardship, and the ever-present threat of family separation. The plantations of Maryland were sprawling fields of tobacco, corn, and wheat, forming the backbone of the state's agrarian economy. By the mid-19th century, Maryland had one of the largest enslaved populations among the border states, with plantations scattered across its rural landscape. Plantations varied in size, but many were owned by wealthy white families who depended on enslaved labor to sustain their fortunes. Most plantations housed between 10 and 50 enslaved individuals, though larger plantations might enslave hundreds. These enslaved people lived in small, overcrowded cabins and worked from sunrise to sunset under the watchful eyes of overseers. Overseers were often brutal, enforcing their authority with whips and other forms of physical punishment. The threat of violence loomed constantly, serving as a tool to maintain order and suppress resistance. The plantation system was not just an economic structure, but a social one, reinforcing the wealth and power of enslavers. Enslaved individuals, however, were not passive participants. Even in these harsh environments, they resisted in both subtle and overt ways, from working slowly to planning escapes. For people like Harriet Tubman, the plantation was both a place of suffering and a catalyst for her determination to fight for freedom. Emotionally, the environment was crushing. Enslaved people lived with the unending dread of being torn from their families, and hope for freedom was a fragile, flickering light that few dared to reach for. Family separation was one of the most devastating tools of oppression used during slavery, designed to dehumanize enslaved people and break their spirit. Enslaved individuals were sold at auctions like livestock, often to settle debts, liquidate assets, or divide inheritances among enslavers' heirs. These separations were not merely economic transactions. They were deliberate acts of control, wielded to enforce obedience and suppress resistance. The drivers of family separation were rooted in the commodification of human beings. Enslaved individuals were seen as property, valued primarily for their labor, physical strength, or reproductive capacity. Children were often sold at a young age to maximize profits, and enslaved women were frequently separated from their husbands to exploit their ability to bear children, creating a cycle of generational bondage. Enslavers used the constant threat of separation to discourage escape attempts and maintain dominance over enslaved people's lives. The emotional and psychological impact of these separations was profound and far-reaching. Parents mourned the loss of children they might never see again, siblings were torn apart, and spouses were forced to endure lives of perpetual grief and uncertainty. For many, the pain of separation fueled acts of resistance, including escape attempts and the establishment of kinship networks among other enslaved individuals to recreate a sense of family. The legacy of this practice can still be seen today. The systemic fracturing of families during slavery disrupted the transmission of cultural traditions, languages, and familial histories, leaving many descendants of enslaved people with incomplete family trees. The economic and emotional toll of these separations contributed to generational trauma, which continues to affect African American communities. The disproportionate rates of family disruption in modern systems, such as incarceration or foster care, echo the historical legacy of family separations during slavery, revealing the long shadow of this inhumane practice. For Harriet's family, the fear of family separation was a daily reality. Her mother, Rit, once hid her youngest son for weeks to prevent his sale, a bold act of defiance that left a lasting impression on young Harriet. By the time Harriet was born, the abolitionist movement was gaining traction. Abolitionists, both black and white, worked tirelessly to end slavery through speeches, publications, and underground networks. The abolitionist movement had its roots in the late 18th century, driven by religious convictions and Enlightenment ideals of equality and human rights. Groups like the Quakers were among the earliest advocates for abolition, condemning slavery as a moral sin. Over time, the movement evolved into a broader coalition of activists, including freed black individuals, women's rights advocates, and Northern intellectuals. Abolitionists used newspapers, books, and public lectures to expose the horrors of slavery, with publications like The Liberator and The North Star serving as powerful tools for spreading their message. Despite their efforts, the movement faced significant obstacles. Pro-slavery advocates fiercely opposed abolition, using economic arguments and biblical justifications to defend the institution. Many abolitionists also faced violent backlash, from mob attacks to threats against their lives. Yet their determination persisted, fueled by a shared belief in justice and the dignity of all people. By the time Harriet Tubman joined the movement, it had become a well-organized force, creating networks like the Underground Railroad to directly challenge the system of slavery. Figures like Frederick Douglass, William Lloyd Garrison, and Sojourner Truth brought the horrors of slavery to national attention. Harriet's eventual work as a conductor on the Underground Railroad would place her at the heart of this movement, forging connections with many of its leading voices. Harriet's family played a pivotal role in shaping her resilience and faith. Her parents, Rit and Ben, were deeply spiritual, and their stories of survival instilled in Harriet a belief in the possibility of freedom. They passed down lessons of courage and defiance, teaching Harriet that dignity could exist even in the harshest conditions. Despite their strength, her family suffered deeply under slavery. Harriet witnessed her sisters being sold away, never to return, and lived with the constant threat of further separations. These early experiences of loss and injustice left an indelible mark on her, fueling her determination to one day secure her family's freedom. As a child, Harriet endured severe physical abuse, including a traumatic head injury caused by an overseer's iron weight. The injury left her with seizures and vivid visions for the rest of her life, which she believed were divine messages guiding her purpose. While these episodes were debilitating, Harriet came to see them as signs of a higher calling. These experiences, though harrowing, gave her a unique sense of destiny. She began to see herself as an instrument of God, destined to fight for her own freedom and the freedom of others. This belief became a source of immense strength, allowing her to endure unimaginable hardships and take extraordinary risks. Harriet's mother, Rit, was a fierce protector of her children. Her act of defiance in hiding her son from sale demonstrated the power of resistance, even in the face of immense danger. This act not only kept the family together for a time, but also inspired Harriet to adopt the same unwavering commitment to protecting those she loved. Rit's courage inspired Harriet's unwavering determination to protect her family, and later, countless others on their journey to freedom. Harriet would carry these lessons forward, transforming her personal pain into a force for liberation. In 1849, Harriet made the daring decision to escape slavery. Traveling alone and by night, she followed the North Star and navigated through forests and swamps, reaching Philadelphia after weeks of treacherous travel. The journey required immense physical endurance and unshakable faith, as she had little more than her instincts and determination to guide her. The experience ignited a fire within her. While she was free, her family and countless others were not, and Harriet vowed to return for them. It was this promise that led her to become a conductor on the Underground Railroad, risking her lifetime and again to guide others to freedom. The Underground Railroad was a secret network of safe houses and routes, designed to help enslaved people escape to free states and Canada. It was not a literal railroad, but an intricate web of abolitionist allies working under the cover of secrecy. The system grew out of the efforts of free black communities and abolitionists determined to challenge the institution of slavery. By Harriet's time, it had become a lifeline for thousands seeking freedom. The Underground Railroad operated from the late 18th century until the Civil War, a span of roughly 80 years. While exact numbers are difficult to determine due to its secretive nature, historians estimate that between 40,000 and 100,000 enslaved people escaped to freedom through its network. It was not a single organization, but a loose coalition of abolitionists, free black communities, Quakers, and sympathetic allies who risked everything to assist those fleeing bondage. A trip on the Underground Railroad was an arduous and perilous journey. Most escapees traveled at night, guided by the North Star, and hid by day in safe houses, barns, or natural shelters like forests and caves. Safe houses were often marked with subtle symbols, such as a lit lantern in a window or specific patterns on quilts hanging outside. Conductors like Harriet Tubman led groups along carefully planned routes, avoiding towns where slave catchers or informants were known to operate. The distance to freedom varied. Some escapees traveled hundreds of miles to reach free states or Canada, enduring weeks or even months of grueling travel. The journey was fraught with danger. Bounty hunters, armed with dogs and weapons, relentlessly pursued escapees. Those caught faced brutal punishment or death, while their helpers could be fined, imprisoned, or worse. Despite these risks, the Underground Railroad succeeded because of its secrecy, ingenuity, and the courage of those who operated it. People like Harriet Tubman, William Still, and Levi Coffin became legendary for their roles in shepherding fugitives to freedom. For those who completed the journey, freedom brought both relief and new challenges. Many settled in Canada, where slavery was abolished in 1834, and built lives in free black communities supported by abolitionist organizations. The Underground Railroad's legacy endures as a symbol of resistance, hope, and the collective fight for human dignity. Harriet was a master strategist, planning every detail of her missions on the Underground Railroad. She used coded songs to communicate with escapees, embedding messages about when it was safe to leave and where to go. Her pistol, always by her side, served not only for protection but also as a symbol of her determination to ensure no one turned back, even in moments of doubt. The risks Harriet faced were immense. Capture meant torture, re-enslavement, or death, and those who aided her faced imprisonment or heavy fines. Yet Harriet was undeterred. Over a decade, she made more than 13 trips back to the South, guiding over 70 enslaved people to freedom, including her own family members. Her bravery and success earned her the nickname Moses, reflecting her role as a deliverer who never lost a passenger. Harriet's courage extended far beyond the Underground Railroad. During the Civil War, she served as a nurse, spy, and military leader for the Union Army, playing a critical role in the fight against the Confederacy. One of her most significant contributions was her leadership during the Combahee River Raid. The Combahee River Raid was a daring military operation carried out on June 2, 1863. Orchestrated by the Union Army and guided by Harriet Tubman, the mission targeted Confederate supply lines and aimed to disrupt the Southern economy by liberating enslaved people. Harriet worked as both a scout and a strategist, using her deep knowledge of the terrain and her network of informants to plan the operation. In the days leading up to the raid, Harriet gathered intelligence from enslaved people in the region, identifying Confederate positions and key supply routes. She also helped coordinate safe passages along the river for the Union gunboats. On the night of the raid, Harriet led Union troops aboard gunboats through heavily mined waters, her guidance critical to avoiding Confederate defenses. As the gunboats approached Confederate-controlled plantations, Union soldiers destroyed infrastructure, including bridges and railways, while liberating enslaved people. Harriet's presence inspired hundreds to flee, many of whom joined the Union Army after gaining their freedom. By the end of the raid, over 700 enslaved people were liberated, marking one of the largest emancipation missions of the Civil War. Harriet's leadership and strategic brilliance solidified her place in history as the first woman to lead a U.S. military raid. After the war, Harriet settled in Auburn, New York, where she turned her modest home into a haven for the elderly, sick, and orphaned. This sanctuary became a testament to her enduring compassion and commitment to serving others. Despite her own financial struggles, she gave tirelessly, often relying on donations to support her efforts. Harriet's fight for justice extended beyond the abolition of slavery. She became an outspoken advocate for women's suffrage, believing that equality should extend beyond race to include gender. Harriet worked alongside prominent suffragists like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, delivering speeches at conventions and sharing her personal story as a call to action. Drawing from her life experiences, Harriet argued that women's contributions, particularly those of African American women, had long been undervalued. Her speeches went beyond calls for voting rights. They were passionate appeals for recognizing the humanity and dignity of all women. Despite her advanced age and fragile health, she remained a powerful voice for change, inspiring generations to continue the fight for equality. Though Harriet did not live to see the passage of the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote in 1920, passing on March 10, 1913, her advocacy laid critical groundwork for the movement. Her life embodied the interconnected struggles for racial and gender equality, and her legacy continues to resonate in movements for justice today. Today, Harriet Tubman stands as an enduring symbol of resilience, freedom, and justice. Her story is immortalized in countless books, films, and monuments, serving as a beacon of inspiration for people across the world. Efforts to feature her image on the $20 bill highlight her monumental contributions to American history and her status as a national hero. Harriet's legacy reminds us of the power of courage in the face of injustice. She not only changed the lives of those she helped liberate, but also inspired a nation to confront its moral failings. Her name has become synonymous with the relentless pursuit of justice, and her story continues to inspire generations to fight for freedom and equality. Harriet Tubman's life challenges us to ask, how far would we go to fight for freedom and justice? Her courage and determination inspire us to stand firm against adversity and work toward a future that honors the dignity of all people. The work of Harriet Tubman and countless others who have fought for freedom and equality continues today through the efforts of organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC. Founded in 1971, the SPLC is a nonprofit legal advocacy organization dedicated to fighting hate, bigotry, and discrimination in all its forms. Like Tubman, the SPLC takes on the critical task of defending the most vulnerable members of society and challenging the systems of oppression that deny people their basic rights. Through groundbreaking litigation, investigative reporting, education, and advocacy, the SPLC works tirelessly to protect civil rights, combat extremism, and ensure that the promise of justice and equality is realized for all. The SPLC's work spans a wide range of issues, from combating hate crimes and defending the rights of immigrants to fighting for educational equity and challenging discriminatory policies. By shining a light on injustice and holding the powerful accountable, the SPLC continues Harriet Tubman's legacy of fearless activism and unwavering commitment to human dignity. We all have a role to play in building a more just and equitable world, and the SPLC provides a powerful example of how we can turn our values into meaningful, lasting change. To learn more about the SPLC and how you can support their important work, please check out the video description below. Explore the description below for books, articles, and documentaries that dive deeper into Harriet Tubman's incredible life. Understanding her journey helps us honor her legacy and apply her lessons to the struggles of today. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for our next video on Frederick Douglass, another towering figure in the fight for freedom.